Welcome to the Business of Apparel podcast. This is the place to learn how to start and scale your own apparel brand and fill it with loyal customers for years to come. I'm your host, Rachel Erickson, owner and CEO of Unmarked Street. I can't wait to share this episode with you. All right, welcome back to the Business of Apparel podcast. Today, I'm honored to have someone who has taught me so much about merchandising and SKU rationalization and everything that I'm out there trying to teach and work with my clients on. Miss Sarah White is a friend of mine who I used to work with at Specialized. Welcome, Sarah. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you so much. What a fun intro. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Ever since you sent the email asking if I wanted to do this, I've been like so excited and thinking, like playing all the things in my head of what are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about? So I'm so happy it's happening.
Yeah, definitely. When I was trying to think of like perfect people to be on the podcast, I don't know why I hadn't even thought to bring you on yet, because this is such a crucial topic. And I think like you just being the authority on it, at least in my world, is so perfect. So Sarah has been a buyer and a merchandiser in several different spaces, shoes, a little bit of apparel when we worked together at Specialized, and some other products. I'd love for you to just give like a quick background of what you've done throughout your career and how you kind of got to where you are now.
Oh, goodness. Okay, great. It's not a linear path, I think, as most people have in their life. So I actually studied psychology in school and was a teacher for a brief moment. I taught first grade very quickly.
I didn't know that about you. That's amazing.
Yeah, really quickly. But I transitioned into more of the outdoor space, and I've worked in marketing. I've worked, like you said, as a buyer. All kinds of jobs, but really I've landed in merchandising and kind of found my sweet spot. Merchandising really does a lot of combining so many different aspects and like that education piece as well. Because if the teams you're working with don't understand what or why you're doing something, it can be really hard to get your ideas passed. So yes, I think I'm digressing, but was a footwear buyer for a chain of outdoor stores, and that was primarily brick and mortar. I've also worked in only the digital space as well. I worked for an e-commerce outdoor site for a few years, and then working with Specialized, it's a little bit of all of that omni-channel approach, right? So we have our own retail, we have a really great like wholesale business with all of our independent retailers, but then we also have our like online sales as well. So those are our three main channels right now. So It's kind of all the work that I've done, all the spaces I've worked in, have really just added up to here at merchandising.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I really love for you to kind of get into the meat of is, especially at Specialized, with how much product the company has and how many different categories it leans into, kind of just the basics almost of like merchandising and SKU rationalization. Like if you were to kind of teach it to someone who knew nothing about it, how would you kind of present these ideas to them?
Merchandising, depending on where you work and depending on how robust your company is, it can take on so many different forms. So like I mentioned, I was a buyer, and a lot of buyers already do merchandising type things. And when I say merchandiser, I don't mean visual merchandising. That's what a lot of people go to, because that's what they know and they hear and they can see it, right? You can physically see like a beautiful space that's been curated when you walk in. I'm not on that end. I'm really on the end that comes at the time of like product creation and working through that. So I just want to clarify that for everybody.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction, because that's like your role is what I'm used to when I talk about merchandising. But I think you're right. I think regular like general public people, when they think merchandising, are thinking about visual merchandising, like merching a store and making it look presentable.
Right. So product merchandising is all the work that has to be done in order for the visual merchandisers to do their job. And so in the simplest terms, it's the right product at the right time, in the right place, at the right price, in the right quantity. So, I mean, take that as you may, because that's a lot of very large bodies of work. And
Mm-hmm.
merchandising doesn't do all of that on our own, right? So I like to think of merchandising as, not to use a wheel as an example, but merchandising as kind of the hub, the center. And then we spoke off to all the different teams that you have within your company, whether that's
Great
big
analogy.
or small, right? So it can be the product team, it can be the marketing team, it can be finance, sales, depending on if you are, if you have regions or markets, if you're worldwide. So all of that just gets a little bit more robust the larger that your company is. So
Amazing. And I've
yeah.
heard it kind of interchangeable with product line management. Do you find that
Oh yeah.
that's true? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the where the distinction comes from product line management, maybe with working with a designer or working with like a product manager,
Mhm.
is merchandising is really good at setting the stage for how many shirts do you need in that line, and how many colorways do you need
Yeah.
in that line as well, and then also setting the life cycle of those products. So when should that colorway launch, and when should that colorway go away?
Yeah.
I
Which
think
is a
it's
more important question sometimes.
yeah, it's the going away that
Yeah.
people really get hung up on,
Yes.
that merchandising can really, really help with. Setting all of that from the very beginning is such a key factor in creating success for your line plan. Because, and no fault to anyone, we've all done this by learning, but
Yeah.
if you don't have a clear line plan, then you don't have a clear plan. And what gets presented to your rider or your retailer or your consumer is not clear,
Yeah.
and they know that.
That's a really good one. And in the entrepreneur world, I hear so much like, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And so that's kind of just another way of saying that.
Yes,
I think it's a
exactly.
great segue too into SKU rationalization, because like the phasing out of product and deciding when to cancel a product or remove it from a line is huge. And I've learned so much from you about this area and just how important it can be, not just for your product line and planning properly, but also to make a more sustainable option within your line because you're not overproducing product. And also it's a huge revenue growth builder. So I'd love for you to kind of break down just a little bit like about SKU rationalization, and like when you teach the teams. I mean, when you taught me, I think about like how you kind of really broke it down so that it was so understandable and easy to just figure out how important it was really quickly.
Okay, so normally I have like an Excel sheet in front of me and I give you, examples that way. So I'll do my best to give just the visual overall version. But first things first, you have to start with really good data. So if your data source sucks, then your this process is going to be really hard. So depending on how good your data is, that might be something teams want to look into of getting computer programs or whatever it might be to source really good
What are
data.
you
So
guys using right now? Do you mind sharing?
oh, it's just whatever our financial teams are using with us. A lot of
Okay.
Tableau,
Yep.
but I'm talking like back end office. Like all of this can be done on Excel, but the data source that you're getting needs to be valid.
Okay. So like
Um,
the information that you're getting from like your
yes,
wholesalers or your customers on what they're actually buying. Okay. That makes
yeah.
sense.
So your sales, your sell through information, if you have access to that, revenue, gross margin dollars is really good to have a clear
Yeah. So
understanding of.
markdowns would go into that, and whether
Yep,
you're having to
markdowns.
put things on sale. Yeah.
Yep, yep. And like just your gross margin percentage as well too. So
Yeah.
it could
Which is
be at
huge.
30 or 30% or it could be at 70%. And we all know we want that product that's
Yes.
getting 70% margin. But that's not always the case. And there is a time and a place for lower margins in a line sometimes. So data, start with good data, right? And what I like to do is define the time period that I'm looking at. So, and start this process when I know that changes can be made to next year's line. Give yourself some time to do that.
Yeah, super smart to time block it.
Yeah, especially if it's your first time going through this process, give yourself some leeway for learning. And every time you do it, it will come more and more natural, and take less and less time. But just like everything, the first time is always the hardest.
It takes a minute, especially if you have a really big line and you're looking at a ton of product.
Yes. So I like to pull all the product, and it depends on how big your line is, and it also depends on how you want to break it down. So let's say the apparel line for a bike company. And
great example.
Right? So it's okay, I'm going to pull everything. I'm going to pull like shorts, jerseys, bibs, socks, accessories, like everything. I'm going to pull everything, and I want to see what are our revenue and our unit and our gross margin drivers. Like, what's driving the business? That in itself, one, if you haven't gone through that process, everyone should be going through that process on a regular basis. So you have a clear understanding of what is driving the business. And that can also be shared with your designers and, so many aspects of your business. So everyone has a clear understanding of what's driving your business.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Yeah.
Because you'd be so surprised at how motivating that can be for so many groups of people. And when it comes time to let things go, everyone has an understanding of, we're not letting go of our main revenue drivers. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So those main revenue drivers, and most of the time, those are very few models.
Yeah.
Very few.
This is where I talk a lot about the 80-20 rule. And 80% of your revenue is typically being done with 20% of your products or less. I've even seen it where it's like 80% of your revenue is being done with 20 products or less in like 1,000-piece lineup. It's, not just 20%, but 20 pieces. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And so those are the products you want to nurture, right? Those are the products you want to make sure you always have in stock or is always available for replenishment. And those are the products that maybe you could take a couple more color risks on. So identifying your product is great. I actually like to list it at a model level from biggest earners to lowest earners, from a revenue aspect. And then I do that same exercise from a unit aspect as well, because maybe you have a really low price point item and you sell 500,000 of them. But then you have a really high price point item and you're selling 1,000 of them, right? Yeah. Maybe the revenues you're not going to see that high unit contributor is really high in the unit or in the revenue list. So,
but it's still important because you're selling so many of them.
It's very important. Yeah. Very, very important. So those are the main things I like to keep in mind. And then I do kind of like a cumulative roll up percentage wise. I like to look at things in percentages. So that number one SKU or that number one model is doing 10% of the line. And I just kind of go down from there and I draw a clean line across when I get to the 80% mark. So anything that falls below that top 80%, those are in question. Yep. Why are they in the line? What are they doing for the brand? Can changes be made to these to help increase them? Or is this just something that the consumer just don't want?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's old and it should be set free. I like to say set free.
That's a beautiful way of saying it.
Because when you say I'm going to kill this, it's pretty harsh, and a lot of emotions come into play sometimes with
That's
all of
super
this.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like the first gist of the SKU rationalization for me. And then it's determining, okay, well, what should be carried over into the next model year or year, depending on how you structure your business.
Sure.
So that's starting at the model level. And that in that example, I started with everything in the business, right?
Hmm.
So you can continue to break it down categorically. Maybe you want to look at just bib shorts.
Yeah.
Okay, what are my top revenue driver of bib shorts, and what are my low earners? Why are those low earners in the line? And you can do that with literally every single category, depending on how deep you want to go.
That's so
Um,
amazing. I think one of the things that I love about you going through this process is that you then pull your personality in and really help everybody understand the whys underneath it. And I'd love for you to speak to that because I think it's so important. Like, once you have all this data down and you have all of these items that you want to set free, you think about all the time that a team has put into it, and you think about all of the love and passion that they have designing it, choosing colors, trying to sell it, and how much that can affect, their morale or how they're going to be moving forward. And so I've heard you talk a couple different times about how it's really important to then include the right people in all of the next rounds of conversations. And so I'd love for you to maybe speak to that a little bit too.
okay, so these are always very delicate conversations because we're human
Hmm.
and all of our work matters. And sometimes you could be talking about a model that, for whatever reason, just didn't land. It didn't land with the writer. It didn't land with the consumer. And it's not, maybe it's not because that product's bad, right? And
Sure.
so it just wasn't working at that time. And so I like to just make sure that when I'm having conversations with people that I keep that in mind, that this is people's work. And people are very passionate and put in a lot of effort and time to make great product. Compassion goes a long way when talking with people, and that's really when the data comes in and can really show people
Mm.
why we're making the decisions that we're making. And I also like to run it by different teams, like, say, the product team. Hey, here are our lowest contributors. I really don't think that these fit in the line any longer. Is there something that I'm missing? What am I not seeing in the data that
Yeah.
that is really that I need to know about, that would blow up our whole our whole line if
Right.
we didn't have these.
Yeah.
Um, and most of the time, they're pretty old. They're on, they're kind of running out. They're near their end of life date anyway, if there is an end of life date.
Yes.
Um, so that, again, if you can set those end of life kind of line planning things up front. So
Hmm.
you've got multiple colors: red, black, blue, and purple. Hey, everyone, this purple is the seasonal color, and we're going to only have that in the line for 6 months.
Yeah.
So then we know, again, at the end of that 6 months, we can set that purple free. Everyone expected it to go. It was the pop of color that we needed to draw attention and make things exciting.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and your sales teams then know too, with like an end of life date like that, I need to get this out there and then be done with it instead of continuing to try to sell it or knowing that I can sell this into future seasons or future years. Super important.
Yeah. So I always just take the approach of collaboration. I'm not always asking for permission to set something
Sure.
free, but I want to make sure I'm not missing anything, because it could be, no, actually, that's our number one SKU in some market that I missed, or it's a key price point that is bringing someone into the brand, or I mean, there's so many reasons out there
Yeah.
that
I see a
that
lot of like key marketing pieces kind of fall into that bucket where like, oh, we really need this piece because this is what our athletes are wearing or something like that. And this got featured in a magazine. And so we want to make sure that we have it for the exposure. I feel like that's also a good one.
Yeah, it is very much so. And I'd like to think that the merchandising team would be either they've set those colorways and
Sure.
given them to marketing early on in the process, or sometimes things happen and maybe the merch team was out of the loop for some reason. But hopefully, in a perfect world, those things can be set sooner.
Yeah. This
Um,
is a good advocacy for strong communication across teams.
yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yes. Absolutely.
Awesome. I think one of the most amazing things about SKU rationalization when I do it with clients or when I talk to people about it is as you start to go through this process and you do it season after season or year after year, the monetary benefit
Oh
is
yeah. Oh yeah.
huge. It's like, and so, well, it's it's almost forgettable because it's you're talking more about product and you're talking about making sure you have the right assortment and stuff, but I think people don't realize when you take products out of a line that aren't serving you, up into that 80% of what you need, all of a sudden like revenues actually skyrocket. And I'd love for you to talk about examples that you've seen of that.
Yes, thank you. Great question. Great reminder. Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, right? Less
Hmm.
product equals more sales. It
Yeah.
just doesn't seem that way. I think maybe because the culture that we live in is always more, more, more. We need
Yes.
more to do more to have more. Um, but what I found is actually you can reduce a line. Like I've reduced lines up to 50% and doubled revenue. So,
Yeah.
wow, I'm doing twice as much with half as much.
Yes. Isn't that
And that's
beautiful? I love that.
yeah, yeah. And if you're a small business or even if you're a large business, think about what taking half of your line or 10% of your line away will free up,
Yep.
right? The design aspects of it, the managing of it, the like there's so much to it that is going to free you up for other things. And it will free you up to have new product come in and be really fresh so that
Yeah.
when the consumer is looking at your line, they're not confused. They're not what like decision fatigue is that
Yep.
what it's called, where
Exactly.
it's like there's so many things to choose from, so I'm gonna not look, I'm on overload, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I always like to think of it as like what's the most simple line that can be offered that is going to benefit the consumer.
Yeah.
um, yeah, and
Absolutely.
it all goes back to like what is your mission, what
Mm.
is your vision, as a company or for that particular department, or category, because that will really help to make sure you're not continuing to add in things just to
Mm.
add them in, right? Like
Yeah.
what value does this product bring, uh, to this line? And if you can't answer that, then it probably shouldn't be in the line.
I think that's such a
So,
valid point.
but I've also had it go the other way where, working in brick and mortar, I worked we had one location, it was pretty large already. It was like 40,000 square foot location.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful,
Huge.
gorgeous. Like we're talking like, I mean, really, really nice high end specialty retailer. And we expanded the physical space. We expanded the physical space. And so with that, we expanded our product offerings. Um, it seems like, yeah, okay, great. Yeah, duh. Like you get bigger, you make your lines bigger, right?
Yeah.
Um, well, our sales didn't get bigger,
Mm.
right? We went through this whole remodel, we made our space bigger, and we brought in more product. But the demand wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so just because you have more product doesn't mean you're going to actually sell more.
Yeah.
And that was a hard lesson learned. And luckily, that was earlier in my career, so I could learn from that really early on. And just because there's more product doesn't mean people want to buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like someone like you would understand like the psychology of it really well of like,
Yeah.
you know, one of the greatest SKU rationalization examples I like to put out is the Model T that Henry Ford made, way back when. It's still the number one selling car that has ever existed because it was so simple. Like customers knew that was it. That was the car that I needed. It was the only car out there. It was the only thing that they could get their hands on. And so everyone had that car. And when you think about really simplifying down a line, like and making something that everybody feels like they want or need, there's an element of that that can be applied, I think, to businesses now.
Yeah. I mean, think about, I love Trader Joe's,
Yeah,
right? Who, like, so many people love Trader Joe's, but Trader Joe's isn't everything for everyone.
true.
Trader Joe's has like very specific products
Yep.
and really good price points at really good quality is like why people go there, right?
Yeah.
But you can't only go to Trader Joe's for all of your grocery shopping. You've got to go to other stores too. But because the product offering at Trader Joe's is so wonderful,
Yeah.
people go there and they're like religious about Trader Joe's.
Totally agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a key part of it too, right? They only offer the few things that they know are quality and that they know they want to stand behind and that they can put their name on. And so that says a lot about them and it says a lot about their products and people get excited about that.
Yeah. And it's cool in like a weird way. Like, how is Trader Joe's cool? I don't know, but
Everyone thinks this grocery store is so cool. That's amazing. Well, is there any other final tips or tricks that you'd love to give about SKU rationalization or if someone is trying to build this into their company, any first steps that you might
yes.
recommend that they get into?
Yes. So first steps are make sure that either the leadership team or the executive level are on board with bringing a merchandising team in, because merchandising really starts at the beginning of like the product brief, at like sometimes even before that. And so if you don't have teams advocating for merchandising to get early in on that process,
Yeah.
it's not going to work. You're going to be swimming upstream. So
It's a great,
that
great
said, there's
yeah.
so much you can do on your own, like SKU rationalization. You don't need a whole team in order to do that if you have access to data and Excel and Rachel to
I've been sharing the secrets with a few people, and
yes.
we do have some spreadsheets that we've been kind of passing around if you're coming to any of the workshops or anything like that. So yeah, I learned all that I could from Sarah, and now I'm paying it forward. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I feel like this is such a complicated topic, and yet it's not at the same time. So I just love chatting about it with people who can simplify it. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thanks, Rachel. This is so fun for me. I could talk about this stuff for hours. So
Definitely, me too.
for letting me nerd out.
Yeah. Well, we'll have you back sometime and we'll nerd out more.
Okay. I would love that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Apparel podcast. I would so appreciate hearing your thoughts on the show. And if you know someone who could benefit from it, please share it with them. My biggest desire is to help other apparel professionals understand the nuances of our industry so we can all work toward making better product for a better world. If you would like to connect further, I'd love to invite you to send me a message through my website, unmarkstreet.com, where I do weekly trainings through my video channel, a monthly newsletter, and offer so many resources to help you start and scale a profitable apparel brand.